Long ago, in a different world, a pharaoh ruled the desert. He was not a good leader and treated his people unfairly. He forced the people to mine for gold and jewels for himself to keep. While he lived in luxury, the people just barely managed to survive on the small amount of food they were given in return for their hard work. While most citizens were no fighters, there were a few who knew of brewing and magic, abilities which could be used to take revenge on the pharaoh. When he finally passed away, the witches gathered around his tomb and cursed it, causing the pharaoh to stay alive and age very slowly, while the outside world changed very quickly. Now that the pharaoh's tyranny was over, most of the people left the desert in search of a new life. But some stayed, and 500 years later, there were only a few people still living by the pyramid, keeping outsiders away from it, so that the pharaoh would remain in his tomb. But on this day, things were about to change as an adventurer found his way into the little village. The villagers tried to warn him and keep him from breaking into the tomb, but just like all other humans, he didn't listen and broke his way into it. This man had explored many old buildings before, and he was hoping to find treasure in this particular pyramid. Indeed he did. He looked in awe at the piles of gold and treasure chests. This was his biggest find yet. But the pharaoh heard that someone had entered his tomb, and up he rose to greet the intruder in whatever way necessary. They crossed swords, but iron is much sturdier than gold, and the pharaoh had not crossed blades with anyone in a very long time. The pharaoh thought this was the end. He was a bit relieved at the thought of finally dying, but he still couldn't let his treasures fall into the hands of this man. But help came. The witches had heard about the foolish man entering the pharaoh's tomb, and they arrived just in time to save the pharaoh's life. The pharaoh was furious. "How did you let him in? How did he get past my defenses? You were supposed to protect me," he screamed at the witches. And so the witches told him about what their ancestors did long ago. The plan had been to keep him in his tomb for all eternity, but they didn't bother trying to get him back there now. Seeing the world in its current state would be punishment enough for him. Of course, the pharaoh didn't believe them, as he had completely lost track of time and rushed out to see for himself. He couldn't believe his eyes. Where his grand desert city once lay, there was now only a few miserable wooden buildings and a cold snow-covered landscape. He felt like he was about to faint, but in desperation he ran to the nearest house and tried talking to the villagers. "Is this some kind of joke?" he said. "Please, tell me you're my people. Tell me this is just the desert painted white." But all he got for an answer was a door slammed shut. He tried all the other houses, but the villagers refused to talk to him. The witches were waiting for him outside of his pyramid. They said that the best he could do was to go back into his grave. The villagers didn't want anything to do with him. Depressed and hopeless, the pharaoh went back into the pyramid. Had he really been stuck in his grave for 500 years? Had he really lost his power? Was he on his own with no one to serve him? No one to care for him? How could they have let the grave plunderer in? These were his treasures, and no one should ever take them from him. But what were they worth to him? With no one to help him in this new world, he could never rebuild his grand empire. It was too cold and unfriendly outside. But wasn't that exactly what he had always been? Cold and unfriendly, never caring about the opinions of his people, nor giving them the gratitude that they deserved. He wanted nothing more than death right now. He felt like a horrible person, and he knew that he deserved the punishment he had been given. But the villagers deserved something more, whether they wanted it from him or not. These treasures couldn't be used by the pharaoh himself, but the villagers could sell them to passerbys or other villages, so that they could finally rebuild and fortify their little settlement. They deserved it for keeping him safe for this long. Even the grave plunderer deserved his thanks for finally setting him free and helping him realize all of his mistakes of the past. He dyed the adventurer's leather armor in the traditional red color of his robes and put it on to keep himself warm. At night, he snuck out of the pyramid and left a treasure chest filled with gold by each of the houses. When the villagers woke up the next morning, they found their gold and saw that the door to the pyramid was open. Inside, the pharaoh had left them even more gold. He had stored the rest of his treasure in a new place and saved it for other people who were deserving of a reward for their kindness or heroism. His old life had been devoted to greed and selfishness. This new one would be devoted to kindness and generosity. And that is why every year, on this particular day, the whole world waits for a gift as proof of their good and righteous behavior, given by a man in a red suit and a long white beard.